HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program has been brought to you by Fairway Market, like no other market, a New York City institution that sells the best local, national, and international artisan foods for prices that can't be beat. For more information, visit fairwaymarket.com. Broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn, you're listening to heritageradionetwork.org.
Another Thursday. It's 1 o'clock, and you have tuned into the Heritage Radio Network. You're listening to the Farm Report, and I am your host, Erin Fairbanks. We are coming to you live from the back of Roberta's Pizza in beautiful Bushwick, Brooklyn. And we are continuing our series on growing beer. And today we have a full lineup of guests. We're going to start the show off with Carrie Blackmore of Good Nature Brewing. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Erin.
It's great to have you on. So we first met about a month ago, I guess, up at the Belgian Comes to Cooperstown, the big Belgian beer festival up in Cooperstown at the Omegang Brewery. And you stuck out for a couple of reasons. One, because you're one of the few female brewery owners standing behind a tasting table. And two, because as we started to chat, you are one of the few, if not the only breweries that's doing their production primarily from regionally sourced grains and hops. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome. So let's get a little bit of background on Good Nature. You guys have been brewing beer for how long?
Well, we actually only opened up shop here in Hamilton last January, so we are a brand new company. We haven't even had our doors open for a year. We have been homebrewing, and I shouldn't say I actually have not been homebrewing all that long, but my partner Matt has about 7 or 8 years of homebrewing experience before we opened up shop. The whole project has been in the works since probably about summer or fall of 2010, I believe.
And why beer? I mean, it's a big jump to go from, brewing a little bit for home consumption into opening like a full-scale brewery, especially one that's kind of trying to do as many innovative things as you guys are.
Well, it's a good question. It definitely was a big jump from 5-gallon batches, in the kitchen to what we do here now. Honestly, the industry is booming right now. It seemed like a good thing to get into, and actually, primarily, we decided to go this route because we could, because we had the ability to source a lot of our raw materials locally or regionally.
So, we've learned in recent episodes of the show that the primary ingredients for beer are grains, usually barley, but a multitude of grains can be used, hops, obviously, water, and yeast. So can you tell us a little bit about, when you guys got started, where did you look to buy hops and to buy the barley or the malted barley?
Well, there are actually not a lot of options out there for New York State brewers who are aiming to even source from New York State, to be honest. So it's not exactly an easy feat. One reason we're able to do it is simply our scale. We're an absolutely tiny brewery for folks out there who and maybe I will admit I've only gotten to listen to the show that you did. Part of the show that you did with Andrea from Valley Malt. So I don't know if you talk about sort of units of measure. We brew on a 7-barrel system, so we're absolutely tiny. The other reason we're lucky and able to source locally is because we have a fabulous hops farm, and I understand Kate and or Larry were on the show as well from Foothill Hops in Munzo. So I don't even think they're 10 miles from our front door. And so their existence is part of why we're able to do what we do. They supply us with probably 95% of the hops that we use here.
Wow.
Now, the grains are also tricky. The only New York State grains that we can purchase, that we're even able to purchase, are from Valley Malt in Hadley, Mass. And that sounds a little strange because they're malted in Massachusetts. They are grown in New York State, and she sets aside specifically New York State grown grains for us.
That's great. And that's essentially because when you're making beer, you want to use the malted grains. And I'm correct that there's no maltery currently in New York State. I know we had Dave from Empire Brew and the New York Brewers Association on last week, and that there are a few kind of spots in the works. But right now, Valley Malt's really the only regional maltery. Is that correct?
Yep, so far as I know, which makes it exceedingly difficult because they are an absolutely tiny company as well.
Well, I think it's like one of those things. It's like anyone at the beginning, any innovators, it's rare that we start out on a huge production chain. So it's nice to kind of get in there. And in many ways, like your kind of operation shows the areas where this grain production, this hops production, and the infrastructure that's necessary for beer production, where the gaps in that system are and where there's opportunities for new business owners or for more farmers to kind of come in and take part in that market. One of the things I thought was interesting is you guys, you mentioned that you're a 7-barrel system, but you also on your website take a moment to note that you're all electric. And I was curious as to, is there something special about that, or why would you highlight that facet of your operation?
Well, when we first opened, we initially opened on a 2-barrel system, which was also an electric system, which is a little bit more common. A 7-barrel all-electric system is a little bit unusual. There really aren't a lot out there, and so we like to highlight that primarily just because it's interesting, but also it is for us. It's a lot cleaner. We're not having to deal with propane, and it actually made our startup costs a lot lower because we've literally got giant immersion elements in our tanks, and that's how we're brewing. It's also nice for us here because for 2 reasons. In the village of Hamilton, we're actually on an electric co-op, so our electricity is very, very cheap, and that's because it's coming from hydroelectric power. So it all just kind of made sense for us. We like that it's clean energy instead of burning propane, and of course it helps our bank account as well.
That makes sense. So, we've talked with Andrea. We've talked a lot about the malting end of things. I'm curious, when you are looking to purchase grains, do you work with a farmer and then they send their grains to Andrea and then you buy them? Or do you just say to Andrea, we only want stuff that's grown in New York State? I mean, how close to those decisions are you? And is it you who has a relationship with farmers, or does it come through her?
We don't have the relationship with the actual barley and wheat growers, although we have met some of them who Andrea purchases from. So we communicate with Andrea, and she sets aside New York grains for us, and it's pretty cool. Like right on the invoice, we know exactly where it came from. She tells us, what town basically. With the hops, it's a little bit different because we're literally working with our neighbors. So we communicate directly to the farmers. We've been to their farms. We're actually part of the Northeast Hop Alliance, so we visited any number of farms in the area and region.
Now I know
it's a little different probably than a lot of brewers are familiar with. I think generally brewers don't have any connection whatsoever to their farmers because it's impossible, and it's very fun, but also sometimes challenging.
Yeah, well, I think like any type of food production, having connections all along the system, it adds an extra layer of challenge, but also I think can provide really interesting opportunities to explore, new relationships, but also to push the industry forward and for the people actually consuming things to be able to share what they're looking for with the producers, I think has a lot of value. Now, I know with hops that most brewers are, you're receiving them in the form of a pelletized. Now, because you guys are so close, do you work with fresh hops? I know that there's a very short shelf life. So how does the processing of the hops happen between, its removal from the field and its entry to your barrels?
Well, I mean, we do brew with fresh hops when they're available, but as you said, there's just a very, very short window where that's even an option. So we actually just brewed a couple weeks ago a wet hop IPA, brewed with hops, actually not from Munsville, but from Bridgewater, which is not too far from us. And actually, a lot of our customers and friends and neighbors just kind of started bringing us hops that they'd harvested from their backyard. So we kind of threw caution to the wind and went crazy, and we're going to try to do that as an annual harvest beer. So he literally, the farmer just pulled up in a big Penske truck with mesh bags full of beautiful green fresh hops. So once a year, we're lucky enough to be able to brew like that. However, the rest of the year, we're working with a dried product. So Larry in Munsville, for instance, after harvest, they're dried, and then they can either go right into vacuum sealed bags and can be flash frozen, or he actually does have the ability to pelletize. We use a little bit of both. Unfortunately, we did try because we wanted, again, it was this interesting thing where we care about Larry and we didn't want him to have to put so much labor into processing for us. So we did try to brew with whole cone hops when we got started, but unfortunately it's pretty, it takes its toll on the system and mucks up a brew day pretty badly. So we will dry hop with some whole leaf hop, but we primarily brew with pelletized.
Yeah, and that seems to be the industry standard. Well, I know you guys have only been kind of in operation for a short time, but what do you anticipate with regards to seasonality? I mean, we are in the Northeast. There is a summer, there is a winter, so there's not, year-round production of hops or grains. So how do you anticipate dealing with your sourcing throughout the winter months? Are you going to be able to put enough aside, or what will that look like?
Well, luckily, again, because we're such a small operation, we don't have a problem with that. In fact, so most people in the industry, they basically contract their hops with West Coast growers or basically a bunch of growers, and they say, this is what I'm going to need for the year, and they're locked in. So they estimate what they're going to use. We do that too, just not with West Coast growers, and there's no actual contract. We're small enough that we basically call up Larry Fisher on the phone and say, hey, Larry, how's your harvest looking right now? This is probably what we're going to need, this much of this variety, this much of that variety. And that's kind of that's what we were doing back in August, was kind of figuring out what our needs were going to be for the year and calling up growers in the area.
Okay, so why do your size obviously sets you apart. What do you think are, if any, are other reasons why there aren't more brewers kind of pursuing this? Or is it kind of an up-and-coming opportunity that you see soon there'll be more people looking to brew with regionally produced goods?
I get the impression, because brewers, of course, care a lot about quality and freshness. I get the impression that if they could, any brewer would want to source their ingredients as close to home as possible. Unfortunately, you've got two major issues. One is a huge one, availability. It's not there. Like we were mentioning, Valley Malt, that's the only malt house in the Northeast so far as I know, and that's the only place you can get New York State grown grain. Not only is she tiny, but there aren't growers to sustain any more than she's probably already doing. The other issue, and then same with the hops. So the other issue is price. We pay more than twice per pound for our hops that come from 10 miles away than we would have to pay if we ordered them from out west and had them shipped across the country, and that includes shipping.
Wow. So how does that reflect? How does that reflect in the cost of your beer for the consumer?
Well, our price point is high. At our place, usually for a standard half-gallon growler fill, you're looking at $12 to $14 for a fill, and then we have one beer that actually goes for $15 a fill. Our wet hop will go for $16 a fill. So that our price point is a lot higher than other microbreweries out there. And again, part of that is because of our size. We're ordering in a smaller, we're not ordering the volume that the bigger people are, but our costs are just much, much higher. Buying malt from Valley Malt doesn't cost what it costs to order, Breeze Malt through a big company. We're talking a lot more per pound. So that is reflected in the cost of the beer. Our goal has been to try and get some of the wholesale prices down a little bit, because that's, we're a microbrewery. We're hoping that that's the bulk of our business. And unfortunately, especially when we first opened, everybody wanted to carry our beer, bars and restaurants all over the place. But unfortunately, when they saw the price tag, it scared them a little bit. Especially, I know in New York, $7 for a pint is cheap. But here in Central New York, $7 for a pint is robbery. So the fancy beers, you go into a bar around here and get a craft beer, $5 a pint is pretty standard for a craft beer.
What makes me want to get in my car and take a little bit of a trip.
It's fantastic, but so we have had to lower those wholesale prices, and unfortunately, we've had to keep our retail prices higher to offset the fact that our wholesale prices are kind of more in the ballpark these days. Also, the cost. So the Nor'easter actually is kind of our specialty ale. That's one that we do year round, and it's brewed with 100% New York State grown ingredients. So all the Valley malt, and of course all the hops are coming from Munsell. It's also a very hoppy beer, and it's 8.2%. So it takes more ingredients to make the same volume, and it's just a pricey beer. It also takes longer to make. So we have to kind of amortize the cost of making that beer by charging more for growler fills of all of our other beers. So that's kind of where we're at.
You're balancing it across.
I think it's the right thing to do. It's our biggest selling beer. People really value that we're even attempting to do it. It's very, very challenging.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Carrie. If you want to learn more about Carrie and Matt's work up at Good Nature Brewing, you can visit them on their website, www.goodnaturebrewing.com. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be on the line with Paul Duglowkinski, of Blind Bat Brewery, and we'll learn the correct pronunciation of his name and a lot more about local beer, so stay tuned.
All complain. Little do they know that I'm the end of the rainbow. She tells me there's money to be made digging graves. She says a lot of things, like if the river had its way with old bear drowning in place.
Hi, I'm Steve Jenkins from Fairway Markets. I've devoted my idiot career to the old ways, the old recipes, the old tools, the old geography of where serious foods come from for centuries. And I've strived to make these wonderful things available to New Yorkers for 37 years, so it's a fait accompli for us to support Heritage Radio Network. And I hope you will too, and I hope you'll keep tuning in. For more information, please visit fairwaymarket.com.
With all this crowd and all this dirt, if I could just bring with me one thing, and that's love, 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 love. That's love. just lose your nerve. Here's a rhyme that you can steal. Here's the road beneath the wheel. Here's the line to carry you home.
Carry you. All right, we are back. You are tuned into the Heritage Radio Network, and you're listening to the Farm Report. I'm your host, Erin Fairbanks, and we are continuing our series on growing beer. I want to give a quick shout out for that extended musical break. That was my cousin, Sarah Keene, on vocals. Check them out. It's the Four Lincolns. And now we are on the line with Paul of Blind Bat Brewery. Paul, I massacred your last name.
No problem. That happens. Yeah, DeLugo Kensky. How are you, Erin?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the show. So you are another brewer in New York State out in Center Point, Long Island, who is looking at how to produce a beer with more regionally produced products. And my understanding of words that aren't the correct terminology, I guess, for something that's not the barley, the yeast, the hops, the water, the kind of core components of a beer is an adjunct. But I guess that word also has somewhat of a negative connotation. So I want to clear up kind of what's the language that we should be using for additional things that you might add to beer, like, honey or other aromatics, or in your case, potatoes.
Well, yeah, adjunct does have a negative connotation thanks to the macro brewers such as Budweiser. They add corn and rice to their beer, but I hadn't thought of of an alternate term. It's a lot like cooking. So if you think about adding different spices and seasonings, etc., that's the way I think of it. And sometimes it's things that are a little more traditionally that have been used in brewing for hundreds of years, such as coriander, which I use in a couple of beers, maple syrup, which I get grade B maple syrup from Vermont for my Belfry Brown Ale. Honey is kind of an older ingredient that had been used for maybe even thousands, if not hundreds of years. I get that from my honey and basil ale from a combination of a local beekeeper, Rich Bloom in Huntington, a little bit from him, and then he's hooked me up with some folks up in the Catskills. But also for the honey and basil ale, I use organic sweet basil grown by my wife, Regina, who happens to be an organic grower and farmer. She's been a farmer on a couple of farms here on Long Island. Our ultimate goal is to establish a farm brewery for Blind Bat to combine both our efforts. But right now we don't have our own land, so she uses it's a borrowed land to grow a number of things, including the potatoes, which you had mentioned, for the Long Island potato stout. And I use, we've been using Cuca Gold as the type of potato for that, and just playing around as a home brewer style. I tried adding potatoes to the mash of a dry Irish stout recipe, and it actually helped dry it out further, so it produces an extra dry stout. In the past, we've used potatoes from Sang Lee Farms in Peconic, Sylvester Manor Farm from Shelter Island, so basically all Long Island potatoes and organic Long Island potatoes.
Nice.
It's also growing. I'm sorry.
I said, I know. It's
also
sounds delicious.
Yeah, my wife's actually experimenting with using sweet potatoes for a saison. Everybody's doing pumpkin ales this time of year, and for November, we're hoping to come out with a sweet potato saison. And I should also, by November, have my Long Island oyster stout out using local oysters. So it's using a lot of this different local ingredients, some traditional, such as honey or coriander, some non-traditional. We're also working on something using Thai basil that is inspired from an idea by Len Thompson, who's a wine blogger out on Long Island. He's also the editor of New York Cork Report. He had an idea for a Thai PA, so it's basically an IPA, but using some ingredients used in Thai cooking. So again, back to using spices and seasonings just like cooking, something else that you can do with beer.
Nice. So yeah, we were just on the line with Carrie Blackmore of Good Nature Brewing, up in Hamilton, New York. And one of the things that kind of kept coming out through our conversation is they're able to do a beer with predominantly or all regionally sourced stuff because they're a very small brewery. And you guys are too. I mean, how much beer are you brewing?
I'm basically still considered at this point a nano brewery, which is even smaller than micro brewery, which is kind of outdated term. I think the preferred term is craft brewery. I got licensed 4 years ago, but it's still a part-time endeavor, working to doing it full-time at a bigger scale sometime next year. But I can brew 93 gallons at a time. I originally was brewing, when I first got licensed, just 10 gallons at a time. 93 gallons is the equivalent of 3 barrels, a barrel being 31 gallons. So I can brew larger batches than I used to, but my schedule of brewing is somewhat infrequent, only maybe twice a month. So I'm really not outputting a lot of beer, maybe 50 to 60 barrels a year. But it does, being a small size, does give you some more flexibility towards experimentation, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, so in your dream world where you have a magic wand and create a parcel of affordable farmland and infrastructure on Long Island, what do you think would be the right size brewery for you to kind of continue exploring unique varieties, but also to increase your production to have some of those varieties be a little bit more regularly available?
What I've been looking at and working on planning for is a 10-barrel system. 10 barrels seems to be the sweet spot. And then, of course, with an increased brewing schedule, I'd be able to produce more beer. But I'm going to keep the two smaller systems, the 10-gallon and the 3-barrel system, to continue to do experimental batches of things. And then if something really, becomes a bit of something more people looking for, then I can brew it on the larger system.
Nice. So I know from your website, which is blindbatbrewery.com, that you can sometimes find your beers at Jimmy's number 43. Jimmy's hosts the Beer Sessions Radio here on the Heritage Radio Network. Also, if you are a member of the Heritage Radio Network and you go to Jimmy's and you show your membership card, you can get $1 off, and that would be how I would first recommend people getting their hands on some Blind Bat. But you also sell at farmers markets, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you decided to pursue that outlet and how you're allowed to do that at some markets versus others where maybe that wouldn't be allowed.
For years and years, New York State winemakers have been able to sell at farmers markets. Only last year were the laws in the state changed so that small brewers, small craft breweries in New York State can sell at farmers markets. I'm a big fan of farmers markets, so it was a no-brainer. There's one in Northport, one town over, that I started selling at last year. I'm there this year also. And then on the South Shore of Long Island, in a little village called Babylon, there's a market that started up there. Then a couple of winter markets, and that's something I want to continue even once I'm up and running in the bigger mode. But what's great about farmers markets is you've got people coming to the market who are not necessarily coming for beer. It's not your typical beer geek population. It's foodies, it's locavores. So it's a natural fit. People will be buying things that they'll some organic vegetables or other things, and then they'll see the beer and they'll try that, and they'll put together a menu for that weekend with things that they picked up at the market.
Nice. Now I know because one of your primary growers is your wife that you guys have, a pretty intimate connection. So I'm just curious, do you plan on producing your own grains or hops, or how do regionally produced grains or hops work their way into your beer now, or how do you hope that they will in the future?
Currently, we're growing just a very small amount of hops. A little bit at this point. I would like to expand that. There are also a couple of farmers here on Long Island. Condoleezza Farms out in Wading River. He's been he really invested in a big way this year. He's been putting out a lot of hops. A number of brewers have been using it. Blue Point, I think, is brewing with his hops this week. Port Jeff Brewery brewed with his hops, and as did Long Ireland Brewery out in Riverhead. They've all been doing these fresh hop ales, which is something you do if you're closer to a hop grower, the fresh hop IPAs usually. So I definitely would like to increase that. Grain, there's not really much in the way of barley or wheat grown here on the island, and I think as David from Empire Brewing and the New York State Brewers Association explained last week, that's something that's being hopefully going to be growing in New York State in the next couple of years. Hopefully we'll get some maltsters established in New York State. I know there's the wonderful maltsters in Massachusetts. But if we can make use of New York and or local barley and wheat, that would be a wonderful thing.
Awesome. Well, we are going to hear a little bit more about the future of grain production in New York. So sit tight. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, if you want to find out more about Paul's operation or find out where to find some of his beers, if you're not going to swing over to Jimmy's for those $1 off pints, you can find him at blindbatbrewery.com. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment with June Russell, who heads up the inspection department for New York City green markets.
Baby's breath and widow's tears, I heard you cry, fall on deaf ears. Walking home alone, so enlightened, no one's listening. Everything she touches turns to gold, turns to gold, turns to gold. And everything she touches turns to gold. She's all alone, she turns to gold. Born in with the wrong kind of dreamers, thrown in where you don't belong. Running from your shadow is only a matter of time before it catches you. And everything she touches turns to gold, turns to gold, turns to gold. And everything she touches turns to gold. She's all alone, she turns to gold. Finds herself on the brighter side. Looks for ambition in a snow-covered night. With the face of an angel and the mind of a child. Everything seems right. Everything seems right.
All right. We are back. You're listening to the Heritage Radio Network. You're tuned into the Farm Report, and I'm your host, Erin Fairbanks. We are on the line with June Russell, who heads up the inspection department for New York City's green markets. But today we're going to talk to her a little bit about the other hat she wears, doing strategic development work for the organization. Now, June, you have been in charge of the Regional Grains Project, and I was hoping you would give us a brief history of that and talk a little bit about how beer fits into that grain work that you've been doing.
Sure. Originally, we were looking for flour for our bakers, and so that's where our involvement with grains and what's turned into a big initiative for us began. And those conversations started in the early, 2004, but when I got my job or this position, I picked those questions up in about 2007, and we were looking for anybody who's doing anything with grains and flour. And there was not much happening, but we did find some people who are growing in Vermont and a little bit in New York State, but mostly for animal feed. Not much was going into grains that we would have for human consumption. And then there were some research projects happening with a Northeast Air-funded project called the Heritage Grains Project and Cornell, and one of my main partners, Elizabeth Dick, who's been worked with NOFA, who now has an organic grains research network. And so it's really evolved. About 3 years ago, we really brainstormed, because at Green Market we provide markets for farmers, and so we're looking for marketing opportunities for our farmers as well. And, if we're going to rebuild a grain system in the Northeast, you have to have multiple markets for your growers. So we called a meeting, and we brought in bakers and pasta makers and distilleries, and we tried to engage our brewers, but it was like this black hole almost, because everybody was buying malt from Europe, and they still are. And that's probably going to be the case for a while. It's going to take a while to build up the system. But just the fact that now it's entered the conversation is really exciting, and it's a great opportunity for our grain growers who are really working to on this steep learning curve as everybody is. And how do we introduce these grains back into the region? We've lost our seed heritage. We've lost our all the things around small and medium scale equipment and processing has been gone from our region for quite a while, especially with grains. I was listening into your show with your previous guests, and Carrie had mentioned some of the barriers, and those are all things that we're trying to address, the availability and working with growers. NOFA has been doing lots of programs to teach farmers how to grow grains, working on sharing equipment, and then, sharing these different models where certainly Valley Malt is groundbreaking. They're entrepreneurs who stepped in at the perfect time to help us grow this out, and they're willing to teach other people how to be maltsters. So we do expect to see more of that going forward, but just to even have this in the conversation is really big for us.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. So I know you guys have a new Facebook page so people can find you, the Regional Grains Project, through Facebook, and they can also find you by visiting the grownyc.org website. And I just before we let you off the line, I know that the green markets now have some beer available at a few of the markets, and maybe you could give a shout out to where people can look for that.
Sure. Right now, we only have Tundra Brewery, and he's at Union Square and at Grand Army. But hopefully, with the new New York Farm Brewers license, we'll see more of that, and I think we're going to get some really fun and interesting beers out of that, coming out of the small malt houses who are working with some of the grains that our growers are producing, and so he's the only one right now because he is from a farm that has the capacity to grow their own barley, and he was working on some sorghum beer.
Awesome. Cool. So check that out. Thank you so much for joining us, June. So that has been the Growing Beer series here on the Farm Report. I think it's been super interesting for me. I hope you've also found it interesting. I think we'll probably revisit this issue and look at other beverages as agricultural products, talk a little bit more into wine and spirits. So stay tuned for that. You can find out more about what's happening at Grow NYC in the green markets by staying tuned for the Green Market Update, which will be happening right after the show. Until then, you should know that all episodes of programs on the Heritage Radio Network are available through our website, www.heritageradionetwork.org. You can also find everything archived and available for a free podcast download through iTunes. We're also on Stitcher. We hope you, if you like what you hear, become a member. It's $60 and entitles you to inflated social status in addition to a slew of benefits around town. So tune in next Thursday. We're going to hear from Will Harris, one of the station's longtime sponsors, about his Operation White Oak Pastures down in Georgia. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
What's hot at the green market? You're about to find out now. It's the Grow NYC Market Update.
Oh man, time flies when you're having fun at the green market. We are on the phone with Liz Carolla, who's the publicity manager for the green market. Liz, give us the scoop. What's happening at the market these days?
Hey, Erin. Well, everybody felt that tiny little bit of a cold snap this week, or at least a dip in the temperatures, which was a welcome relief because I think everybody was getting kind of loopy with the heat, especially out at markets. So that means that the cold weather is coming soon, and a lot of the summer produce is going to be out. But that's okay because that means a lot of new varieties and new produce is coming in. I spied Brussels sprouts this week, and the diehards won't eat them until after the first frost. The frost does definitely improve the flavor and sweetness of the Brussels, but I know myself and a lot of people in this office and out at market can't wait for the first frost, and we'll be gobbling them up before then. And then all kinds of winter squash, kabocha, butternut, acorn, delicata, red curry, spaghetti, all starting to arrive, and really exciting to see them because of their shapes and colors and really their representation of fall and everything to come. So I want to talk about something not to miss. They're going to be out soon. So beans, the dry beans will stay at the market through the winter, but the fresh beans, the limas, cranberry, Jacob's cattle, black cocoa, they all have really fun varietal names. there are just a few of delicious and beautiful varieties of fresh and shelled beans we have available. They're an incredible accompaniment to the dishes you're already preparing at home for lunch and dinner on top of salads and with all your market veg. And really, if you've only eaten store-bought dry beans or shell beans for that matter, or fresh shell beans, the taste is a revelation. It is a completely different flavor, and they're so good for you. So also, if you get those at the market, don't soak them. Even the dried beans, they really, they're still so fresh that they don't require a lot of soaking, the overnight soaking thing. No, you just have to cook them in some really tasty stock, and in about a half hour, 45 minutes, and you'll have your dish ready.
Yum.
Yeah, sounds good, huh? And then coming up is fall broccoli rabe. So this bitter green you see in Italian dishes a lot is really famous for its spring debut, and it's kind of the harbinger of spring, but it shows up again in the fall sometimes, and I look for it because I can't get enough of it in the spring, and then want to eat more of it in the fall before heading into winter. So yeah, it's a really good one.
Awesome. So what about, I know that it's the Jewish holiday. Will there be anything at the market, regarding the New Year?
Yeah, so we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We had actually a neighborhood temple come out near Union Square last week and give out information and apples and honey. But we want to encourage everyone out there celebrating Rosh Hashanah starting this Sunday that to buy their ingredients at the market. So brisket, chicken, yams, potatoes, onions, cabbage, chicken stock, herbs, apples, pears, and honey, all available. So our boss, our director of Green Market, Michael, celebrates Rosh Hashanah, and so we've been hearing about his menu all week. So I felt the need to wish everyone out there a Shana Tova, and hope that everyone has a nice holiday weekend.
That's awesome. What about other happenings at the market? Any events going on this week?
Yeah, so much fun stuff. So the Sunnyside Green Market in Queens will have a late summer, early fall, I guess now, early fall clam bake with American Seafood. American Seafood is a fisherman that sells there. They fish out of the mid-Atlantic waters, just like all of the Green Market fishermen. So they'll have a clam bake there. Everything's free and open to the public, so it should be tasty. We're partnering with Our Goods. So Our Goods is a community of artists, designers, cultural producers who want to barter skills, spaces, and objects. So they have an online site that's really user-friendly and great to use, and they encourage individuals to kind of sign up, say what they can offer to the bartering community, and then see the kinds of things that they would want to exchange for. So Our Goods is hosting, it's the second year. Last year it was really successful. Greenhorns comes in and does all the decor for the event, and they host a big free dinner. It's open to the public. It's in the Union Square Park House at the north end of Union Square, and it's from 4 to 6 on Saturday. And then we're going to do some upcoming book signings with Robin Schulman, who wrote Eat This City, and Chef Mona Talbot, who will be actually at Union Square this weekend. So all kinds of book signings coming up. And actually on Sunday, I'm really excited about this one. We're doing a burger cook-off with State Senator Daniel Squadron as he squares off against City Council member Brad Lander in a grass-fed burger cook-off. We're going to get grass-fed beef from Grace and Angus Acres, and this is the first time we've had politicians out cooking in the market and going up against each other for a kind of an Iron Chef type cook-off, so I think it'll be really fun.
That sounds awesome, a little burger smackdown. So you heard it here first. Folks, get to the market, get your fresh beans, a revelation in fresh bean flavor. Be on the lookout for Brussels sprouts. If you can't wait till after the frost, you don't have to. They're here now. And I'm super excited about the broccoli rabe. I know I try and get in as many fresh greens before the winter months as possible. If you want to learn more about what's happening at the markets, you can visit grownyc.org/our markets to find out more info on cooking demos, book signings, giveaways, and everything that's happening each week in your own neighborhood green market. If you want more volunteer opportunities or info on farmers, that's all there too. You can follow them on Twitter to get the update on the latest and greatest. It's at UNSQ Green Market and at NYC Green Markets. Liz, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing what's going on next week. Stay tuned.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a non-profit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.